Hello, LinkedIn and Facebook, and also YouTube. Glad to have any and all of you join us today. Appreciate you joining us. Apologize for a little bit of tardiness. Technology always keeps things interesting and never dull anyway. So, Anton, you want to kick us off today?
Yeah, guys, just want to talk today. We've really talked about stress for a long time, and we're not going to necessarily stop focusing on stress. There will just be a component of many other conversations that we have. But today's topic we're going to discuss is personal development, really kind of rethinking some things that we want to do and different stuff there. And also just how to start the journey, how to ask yourself the right questions in order to start the journey of personal development. And that'll be our focus of episode number 56. Let's hit the next slide, Kev.
Okay.
Yep. So this is the agenda. We'll first talk about rethinking soft skills in HR. Just a quick article. As always, we like to talk about HR news. Then we'll talk about the wrong development question, the right development question, beginning of development journey, options for development, and ultimately how we can help. But before we get into that, just want to give you a shout out. If you're watching this, let us know where you're joining from, whether we're, seeing you live right now or whether we're going to catch you later. We'll always want to give you a shout out. And ultimately, we want people to join our mission, right? We're trying to create a movement. Human SOS stands for Human Sustainability Organizational System, but it's really about truly putting human beings first in organizations and creating sustainable workplace ecosystems that allow people to be happy, thriving, productive, and ultimately retain them for a long period of time in order to create a competitive advantage for companies through their people, because that is our greatest, opportunity right now, is helping people to be better in order to perform better, in order to help the company be better. So let us know where you're joining and type it in the comments. We'll give you a shout out, but let's hit the HR article.
Okay.
So rethinking soft skills in HR, and it's really talking about, if you're looking to get hired or if you're hiring people in HR roles, what ultimately soft skills mean, right? And it's talking about, these are not just nice to have, right? They're not just something that you think, oh, I would like to have people with soft skills. It would be nice to do that. These are ultimately your core cultural contribution skills. If you have a poor culture, it's not just to say that you're not doing the right things as an HR leader or a leader in general, whatever it may be. It may be that you hired poorly or you inherited some really poor hires that are lacking these soft skills, that are lacking these core cultural contribution skills that are leading to poor cultural performance and environment. And for example, a candidate who appears to be committed, motivated, and able to resolve conflict is likely to have the capacity to stay with the company for a long time, right? So it's not just something that's tangible in the air, and soft skills are just this thing that is not real. That's what they create. When you hire people that can solve conflict, they can resolve things, they have resilience, they're able to communicate better, they're going to stick around longer. And we know how expensive hires are, how expensive development is, and in many cases, how expensive fires are. What are your thoughts on that first one, Kev?
Yeah, one of the things interesting about, first of all, soft skills. Some of them are learned, but a lot of this soft skills are elements of who we are and affects our approach to culture. And I think that one of my favorite sayings is the comment that, we can teach technical skills, teach people how to do this or that, but it's much more difficult to teach character or soft skills. So if we're prioritizing a good company that understands their culture and their people, will do better hiring off of soft skills or character, and then helping them learn the technical capabilities of whatever they need to do from a task standpoint.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. It makes me think soft skills are not something that we've had in our toolbox for a short period of time.
Right.
How your soft skills come in, or those kind of things, whether you're really bad at it, you've been really bad at it for a long time. If you're really good at it, you've been really good at it for a long time. Why? Because this stuff is created in our childhood. It's developed in our adolescence, and then it's really fortified in our early adulthood. So by the time these people become in their mid-20s, 30s, or later, the ability to shift that becomes much harder because of
Mm.
how long they've been ingrained into being a certain way, right? So it's much easier to identify the people that are the right fit for your culture and then develop the rest. But unfortunately, that's not what's happening. A lot of times we're prioritizing experience, we're prioritizing all these things. I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, well, you need 10 years of experience to do this. And I'm like, great. Why? And
Yeah.
they give me this technical jargon stuff. I'm like, you realize I can learn that in 6 months. Like I can in 6 months be where you need me to be there. But the things that I bring to you and your team from soft skills standpoint, leadership standpoint, people development standpoint, that stuff would take years and years for somebody to accumulate and learn. So just a different way for leaders to think about. And it talks about philosophy and motivation, right? This part really focused on if you're a newer HR hire, and whether you're young or old, it doesn't matter. You're trying to come in and show that you want to be hired for an HR role, maybe without HR experience, right? So they talk about, since the skills needed to be successful in HR are often less technical, recent graduates or people trying to change roles who are interviewing for HR jobs should find ways to explain to hiring managers the philosophy towards the profession,
Mm.
right? Because HR has shifted a lot in the last 10 years, even since I've been exposed to it. We went from a compliance department, which it still is, unfortunately, in some places still that, to more of a people support department, which is what it always should have been, right? But if you still believe that it's that old thing and you don't show that passion, that desire to help people, coach them, develop them, to really create good culture, you're not going to be a good fit. So trying to show that through, your philosophy and explaining what your belief on it is going to be a good thing. What's your thought on philosophy, Kev?
Definitely. Again, it goes to people's mindset and those skill sets that are less technical. And those are, to me, more critical. I think about going back a little ways to Good to Great by Jim Collins, talking about rather than focusing on the technical skills, find the right people first and assemble your team, and then hand out the technical components and that. And then there is a body of evidence out there that's really coming to the forefront more and more, is that a predictor of someone's success in a job is more based on, again, the soft skills, the philosophy, the inner parts of a person, their behaviors, and again, which are developed years before. Those are they're seeing a pattern that those are better predictors of someone being successful in a given career area. And there's even company out there that has crosswalk behaviors with the different jobs and are helping to put that together. But that's a concept in HR. Find out people's philosophies, find out their motivation, because that's going to determine more, not only long-term success, but their ability to overcome. Because, if they're bought in and they're sold on what they're about to do, they'll figure out ways to overcome the problems if we give them the opportunity and a bit of support.
And trust, right? And belief. Yeah. And that's what people need a lot of, is just leaders showing belief that they can grow there. And that's a big part of development. And it talks about emphasizing the intrinsic motivation for wanting the job, right? If you're talking about helping people, creating purpose, especially tying in company vision and values into how you as an HR leader or whatever person can help that's going to really help you. So a powerful story that emphasizes your motivation and your soft skills can open doors that might appear to be closed to young and emerging professionals or just transitioning professionals, right? So if you are oftentimes just applying through an ATS, you can't get that out. You can't get to the point of delivering that story. They may never see it. They may never hear about it. So if you're in one of those transitioning places or you're a younger professional, use LinkedIn, use your network to connect with these leaders that are hiring managers or people that can connect you to a hiring manager, so you can show up with your personality and be able to get there with your personality, because your resume cannot deliver your personality. And that's why networking is at the forefront of getting that job and when you transition and you're a new hire.
Yeah, and the emphasizing their intrinsic motivation for wanting the job. Okay, this may be a newsflash, but both from an HR standpoint as well as a job seeker standpoint, the dollar amount of earning, if that is your intrinsic motivation for wanting the job, that's bad news for both the company and the job seeker, because being at this point and stage in my life, I know a lot of people that now say, wow, I've made nice money, I've got all these things, but I didn't do what I really wanted to do or what was desirous for me to do. And the value of those things and that money is really limited. And then when you have challenges from an HR standpoint, we go through a pandemic situation, and then in some cases the money has to be brought into question. If the intrinsic motivation for the job is the money, then you start losing people based on that. So that, to me, that's a non-starter from the beginning.
And it's funny, as a sales manager for many years, I used to hire based on hunger. I called it based on hunger, how much money these people wanted to make. I said, if you're not wanting to make six figures, don't come work for me, because it's just not the job for you. And I used to think that was one of the greatest predictors to whether these people are going to be successful or not, or stick around or not. And it's not. It really is not. I brought a bunch of rock stars that, were there for short term, and then they jump to their next opportunity because they're just chasing the paycheck. They're just chasing wherever they can get the bigger return on their time. But there was no intrinsic connection. And then when I started to shift and hiring people that believe in our vision, believe in what we're doing, and may not be as experienced as some of these rock stars, yeah, they didn't start out in the first 6 months doing as well. But 2 years later, I still had them, and many of them became better than the rock stars because they really learned everything we did. That became aligned with the company process, but became aligned with culture versus just doing their way, their things that delivered high amounts of sales.
Welcome, Chris. Appreciate you joining us. And Chris makes a comment I want to share here. He says, thanks for highlighting that it is important to do what we really want to do. Once the day is past, we can't get it back. Yeah. How we spend our time becomes a key motivator. And if we're not spending our time doing what, in my word, what we're designed to do, we will get to a point where it doesn't matter what the money is at all. And we will, at a minimum, lose interest, and at worst, begin to burn out, because one of the stressors involved is not doing what we're wired to do. That becomes a major stressor.
Ooh, you just hit on a big one, right? And we talk about life stressors as being some huge stressors, and you can't separate life, health, and work. We're all kind of one human being. And I've been there. I've experienced the stress that you're talking about. It sounds maybe a little cocky, but I for the last 15 years plus, I felt that I was meant to do something great in this world. I've not known what that is, but it's just been that feeling. And I've recently identified it was going to be creating these human sustainability, cultures and better organizational ecosystems. That's been around maybe about 4 or 5 years. But when I'm not on that path, and I know I should be on that path, I feel that's my calling, whether it be from higher power, whether it be from my internal intrinsic motivation, it constantly makes me feel like I'm giving less to the world. I'm being selfish. I'm taking care of myself instead of doing what my gifts were called to do. And that to me is one of the most stressful things out there. And if it's sitting there eating at my mind, you may not realize it's stress, but you're thinking about it all the time. Mm-hmm. I promise you, it's doing the same thing to you chemically on the inside and to you mentally in your head as a bad boss always yelling in your ear. We just don't look at it that way, which me and Kev often like to talk about. The problem with stress management is that more people are not doing it because they don't see all the connections, all the symptoms that are coming out, because they don't fully understand stress yet. And once you do, you go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how much it was impacting. There is nothing more important in my life right now for me to work on myself or for my team to work on than fix stress, because it is really killing us. Let's get into the next slide.
Welcome, Wally. Glad to have you back. I believe Wally's been with us before, so welcome. Glad to have you again.
Yeah, guys, type in where you're joining from. If you have any comments, we live engagement. It's this is so much better when you guys type in your thoughts and we kind of talk about them. And then also love to see where you're joining from. But why am I not getting developed at work? I told you we would have the wrong question. This question I hear all the time, especially in HR areas, but in any really training and development stuff. And that's, I'll come in, I'll get an assessment on a team when I used to do team recoveries, and that would be the number one complaint. Why am I not getting developed? Why is my leader not providing what I need? And there's a book that I often talk about. I've talked about on the show many times. It's called Question Behind a Question. And it teaches us to reframe how we ask questions. And ask yourself, when you're reading this question right now, does this question create action? Does this question change anything? Or does this question just make you spend on time on things that you cannot control? Whether it be your boss that doesn't think about it, whether it be the system's not set up that way, maybe that the organizational development right now is not possible. But it doesn't mean the door is closed for your development. Later, we're going to discuss different options. But first, you have to reframe that question. Any thoughts on asking the wrong question, Kev?
It makes me think about when we were having some discussion a while back, one of our sessions about legacy. The idea that we want to be somewhere, we have to consider what we want our legacy to be and learn to ask the right questions relative to that concept. Where do we want to be? Rather than why am I not getting developed at work? Ask, how can I get developed in this way or that way or the other way, and approach it differently. I watch people around me that are working in companies that don't have good leadership, and this question comes up all the time. And what I always try to encourage them is to consider, well, what can they do? What can they ask a different question in order to begin getting development opportunities, even in spite of bad leadership?
And that's the thing. I love how you said in spite of bad leadership, and you also already stated the first word. Changing the first word of the question is one of the most important things when we're asking that question. Go ahead, hit the next slide, and you'll see the difference. This one starts with a why, and the next one starts with what. And Kevin said how. Those are the two best starting words because they're action-based. Then the second thing is, whatever the second thing is, it's usually talking about they, him, she, talking about other people, right? In the first wrong way of asking, we can't control other people. You should ask how I, right? Me. And that's what's focused on and what you can control. That is going to be the best way for you to do it. So the right question is, what can I do to obtain the needed development, right?
And Anton, what you make me think of, I just shared, I'm teaching a leadership class currently. And within the last couple of classes, I reminded them that an effective leader does away with if they thinking. Mm-hmm. Well, if they had just then, if they wouldn't then, mm-hmm. And same concept. Stop thinking of what someone else should, could, needed to do, and think about what you can do to affect the situation. And in this case, it's about development. Let's see, Wally's got a question he wants to throw at us. So any solid idea how to adopt new technologies to developed employee rather than old legacy methods? Wow. So as I understand it, well, Anton, how would you interpret this question?
I mean, they're probably talking about onboarding or development, that kind of stuff. One of the biggest things is there just used to be a lot of training, kind of watch videos, memorize things. But now the new way to adapt things, if I'm understanding this correctly, is custom tailoring. You have to tailor things to people's individual needs, match them with their values, express how these things that you're developing them in adjust to their values. The difference to me, and maybe this is not the exact question or the question you're asking, but the main difference between old legacy ways and traditional ways, whether it be technology or not, is one size fits all versus customization. right? Old legacy methods. Here's your onboarding plan. Here's the steps that you need to have in order to achieve an X role. And it's like these checklists. That's what it seems like, but they're not living, breathing processes, which when it comes down to human beings in modern world and how fast everything's changing, we have to develop people in a moving, breathing, adjustable way. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. Well, and I have took it from a different angle. We talk about how right now it seems like the solution to every problem is a new software program, a new something, and more established, more senior members of employee groups sometimes don't take to new technologies readily. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that may be necessary for some of the, again, what I think of as a developed employee, a mature employee, to help them with the new technologies is to revisit the idea that, I'm kind of a peculiar part of my generation in that I am very comfortable with technologies, but most of my generation and even the following generation were not completely comfortable functioning in technological world. And so one of the things that I've been doing and offering is to help go back to the idea of, well, what is technology, and get it at its core value, its core basis, and do it in such a way understanding that most of that group doesn't understand technology language. Some of them, you talk about an app and they may look at you rather peculiar and go, what's that? And so for some of our employee groups, we've got to revisit and not assume that they have a comfort level or an understanding of technology that then makes them easily adapt to the new technologies we bring in. So maybe a different angle. Wally, if you want to define the question a little differently, if we haven't answered it, be happy to do that, and hope otherwise that we have answered it. Welcome, Ricky. Glad to have you. God bless you as well. Welcome, Diana from Ireland. It's been a while. We're glad to have you back. And appreciate Diana says she's not a really tech-minded person. And to be honest with you, there are a lot of people that are still not techie by temperament or nature, especially if you're part of the boomers, the Xers, and even some of the Gen Ys are not completely, they haven't been immersed in the technology, so the level of comfort there is not there. So we may have to back up, and as part of their personal development is help them get comfortable with just technology in general.
And the question also makes me think about is changing development, right? Developing people into something new. And when we think about it, a lot of times when leaders create development, I've been guilty of these guys, we take the approach of if we build it, they will come, right? Field of dreams, that kind of thing. Let me build this amazing development program. The tech is great. It looks great. Everything's pretty. Everything flows well. But the why behind a team member needs to do this is not connected to their personal values and personal beliefs and things like that. And if that is not done, the adoption rate of your new development, the adoption rate of new processes is going to be slow. You're going to have your, the typical in the curve of innovation, you have your early adopters and, you got your late adopters and everybody in between. And by focusing on connecting this development to them as a human being, not just to them as a professional completely,
right?
And also not just to them in your role, not just to them in your company, it may connect to their bigger picture things. You're going to get a lot more of your workforce to get into the early adopter side and people that are really getting after it versus the laggards that are trying to go as long as they can without switching over or seeking that development. So really focus on, their why they need to do this.
Wally kind of clarifies. He says we should understand people to adopt technology as its demand of time for your betterment rather than continue with legacy methods. So part of it is, and people may not get this intuitively, but explaining the value of why the technology and how it will uh, improve the situation. A lot of times I see leaders will implement new technologies and assume everybody understands why it's better. As a leader, we need to step back and say, this is why I believe it's going to be better. And by the way, how it will benefit the individuals being asked to adopt it.
Yeah, and depending on the way your leadership role is, like how long has it been since you've been on the front lines, or if you're still engaging there, engage with some of your performance in the front lines. Talk about what this does for them. Talk about how changing these things is going to impact their lives, their daily activities, and then see how they will help you to explain it better to the rest of the team that may not be as on board right away. So engage with frontline and get their perspective.
Well, and what I would suggest is to do that prior to making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got this in mind, and before you make the commitment to this new technology, go out and see. Do you think? Does it appear that it will really do what we think it'll do, or is it just another? For we like to joke around. Is it just another ping pong table approach to culture? Is it a checkbox, but in the end, it's not effective? It's actually sometimes can be counterproductive, and the effectiveness, rather than being effective at all, it's actually a detriment.
Or really expensive and not really create the result that you're looking for because the adoption wasn't there. The people are resenting it or created more problems than it did solutions. So I love it. Let's get into the next one. So now we're going to talk about starting the journey. And it's a cycle. And if you guys don't see that, you really should see any personal thing is a cycle. We're not this on and off switch.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just going to go, person did know something, I developed them, boom, we switched the switch on, now they're good to go. It's a constant sliding cycle. What?
You're not plug and play?
Not plug and play. There's no formulas. There's no secret sauce that's going to help all of your employees. The secret sauce really is understanding the individual. And I don't care what the thing you're trying to go after. That should start with that. But as yourself, right, we're really talking about development for yourself or even as a group for people. The process is the same. We start with identify the issue, identify what is needed to be done. And this is where I talk about customization becomes so important, right? Why would I spend an hour, a unit of time across the board in my entire team if 50% of that team are already pretty good at it and 50%, 25% of it are decent and only 25% are truly struggling? Why waste that? But that's what happens all the time. Why not said we have a development hour and let's figure out who has what needs and spread them out appropriately. And to do that, first identify what needs to happen. Identify the demographics, the groups, how everybody's doing and what needs to be where. Then get into the plan, right? Creating a priority, priorities of what needs to be first, what needs to be second, then getting into the action. And I like the word record on there. A lot of times we don't do enough of the recording pieces to understand how this development is going to help. Is it actually working? That's one of the biggest things that you see people that are really spending a lot of time in education and training people, not just education like college. I'm talking about like professional education. They need to see returns. They need to see how much did this thing that I did here impact the thing that I was trying to, achieve here. And by recording, you understand that. Then you review that and you reflect and you say, how did my plan work? Did it do what it needed to do? As Kevin said initially, we asked what we wanted to do and then shift the plan according to what you discovered. But if you're not recording, if you're not reflecting properly, you're just doing the cycle over and over and it may be seeing improvement. But one of the biggest things that we love to talk about, there's a difference between making marginal improvement and making improvement at its potential. We want to make sure that you're investing your people's time, most importantly, and also your company money into things that are going to reach their potential, not just create a small little improvement.
Yeah, and recording and evaluating is so key because quite often we'll make a decision on development or even technologies, things like that, based on a reputation that it has from other people, which I get that. You have to start somewhere. But just because it will work for 30% of the population doesn't mean that it's automatically going to work for our population. And so it can't just be especially continued because of its reputation. It has to be continued because of its success in what we're trying to achieve with it. In fact, Wally makes a good comment here that, and this will lead into some of the other, but wait, we have to change learning methods to make our organization learning organization as well. And that's an important aspect to development. In other words, what I read his comment is that we have a culture of learning, and the best culture of learning is going to be based on making sure what we're doing is actually accomplishing the learning objectives, so to speak.
Yep, absolutely. Love it. And I love the culture of learning. It's as an assessment. If you guys are not familiar with Strength Finder, Gallup Strength Finder, we talk about this as a team once in a while. And there's an assessment, and learner is one of the strengths that it assesses. I love having people that have that as a high thing. But I've also seen people not have it high, be put in the right culture, be exposed with the right, development opportunities, realize that they can actually learn, establish a growth mindset, and all of a sudden they're scoring high learner. It's not something that just baked in. It's not, like I said, it's not that on and off switch. As leaders, we can help to shift that by impacting and developing people the right way.
Well, and one of the things, I have to put my trainer hat on here as we talk about development is we go in again under the idea that this thing, this whatever it is going to fix everything. And even with that, we don't have identified objectives. Mm-hmm. And so, I used to talk about the difference between a good discussion for learning versus a good BS session is just is objectives. What are you trying to accomplish? And if you're not considering that as part of this, the action and record component, then you're just going through motions, and that may or may not affect. And the other part of it is if it's ineffective or it doesn't meet the objectives, especially of your team, not just the organizational objectives, then you're going to, we talk about stress, that will become a big stressor. Rather than fixing problems, it will create more problems, which will potentially or likely doom the plan if those components aren't considered as part of it.
Yeah, the world is not bivariate, right? And we have to look at all these different variables as leaders. And if you haven't figured out as a leader, your job is hard. You're going to, there's a lot on your shoulders, but it is a rewarding thing to be able to see somebody lack a skill, create a plan, cycle through the process, review, record, reflect, change the process, but then ultimately see them reach their potential there, right? And the big thing about development too, especially as a leader, make sure you're not developing people and stuff and spending a ton of time in areas that they're not going to be good at. It's another component of development that we don't talk about enough, right. But develop people in their strengths, because in our world, we literally can have segmentation where this person really focuses on this aspect of the job. And maybe it's two people in the same role, but there's different duties. And one of those people is much stronger in certain duties and another person is much stronger in other duties. And you should maybe divide them, not equally, but we have this job description. We have this, way that we're doing things, and we're going, okay, well, you're this role and you're this role. Here's what you do. Here's the skills that you need. Now go. If you're lacking those skills, we're going to spend a lot of time to making that happen. Is that really the most efficient way for us to run companies? Absolutely not. That's not, in my perspective, at least.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm trying, you and I both are big about figuring out what are the roots of why things are done or they're thought. And all of a sudden I realized that part of the what we may be dealing with is a root of everybody becoming a well-rounded person. And, that's it gets into one of my pet peeves. Universal education is about the well-rounded person. a well-rounded person, in my estimation, is about somebody that knows their strengths and their weaknesses and knows how to function in their strengths and accept their weaknesses, and also be able to recognize and accept strengths and weaknesses in others. To me, that's well-rounded, not trying to become good at everything. And so, to me, that's the root of what we're talking about, is tasking and learning to our strengths. Put people where they're going to be successful. Don't make it so that to be the best widget turner, you've got to be able to turn widgets left-handed and right-handed. No, if you're stronger right-handed, get better and more effective and be successful as a right-handed widget turner. Mm-hmm. And find someone else that's a good left-handed widget turner and combine them, and get away from this notion that we're all supposed to be well-rounded in the sense of being able to speak to or do everything. That's wrong. That's just not how we're made.
And that philosophy goes against diversity and inclusion in its nature.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like that in itself, I think we're identifying some of these key problems. And how can you have diversity and inclusion when everybody's supposed to be well-rounded, right? By somebody's definition, somebody's standard. And some people, as an example, right? You may be in sales, and I've seen this a lot because I have so much sales experience, guys. I always talk about this, but you different cultures sell differently. That's just how it is. And you have to understand that. And trying to teach certain closers to be hard closers, it's like impossible. Like you're making them so incredibly uncomfortable trying to teach them these gimmicks that other salespeople use and these closing techniques. And they're going, I want to understand the customer's problem. I want to show them how our product is going to help them do that, and then let them make the decision. So I can go about it two different ways as a sales manager. I can do the well-rounded approach and try to get everybody to know the closing techniques and really get them better and role play them to death while making them uncomfortable and hate their job. Or I can focus on how can I develop this person to better show how this product fits the customer's problem. Not focus on closing, but focus on education around the product, focus on presenting it in different ways, focusing on understanding how to listen and speak in customers' language, those kind of things, instead of being this well-rounded. Because when we're talking about well-rounded, you're talking, and my mind's really visual. I'm thinking about two things. One is a well-rounded hill, and one is a beautiful mountaintop that's got that gorgeous peak. Right? Which one do you want as an employee? I want that peak. I want that right at the top, at the pinnacle of their potential, right? I don't want this little molehill that's really well-rounded.
Yeah, they're one against the horizon versus the other. Just, the hill just doesn't take your breath away.
Not impressive. It's not impressive. When you have a whole bunch of hills, you may be okay, but if you really want to have a great, company or a great team or whatever it is, you got to have mountaintops. And not everybody's a mountaintop either. Some people are content with being a hill. That's just the reality of it all. Like, we need to get away. And you ask why it is. Why do people keep doing this? I think that we have a lack of leadership understanding around here. I think that leaders take the easy route. That's the reality. And guys, I'm saying this from experience. I'm not saying that I've done this right. We take the easy route, especially because if you were raised in the military as a leader, everybody's kind of the same, right? You got to get all these people to this level, push them, drive them, whatever it is. But as leaders, we have a hard time adjusting to each person and really getting to know each person. Kimberly, when she's on our show, she talks about really knowing your team. And leaders don't know their teams enough. And when you don't know your teams enough, you cannot effectively develop. That's just the reality.
Right. And what, we bash bosses, and I understand because the term boss to me has a very negative connotation. But the primary difference between a boss and a leader is approach in getting people motivated. And one is based on authority, and that's we'll all do this or die, or we base it on influence. And if you're going to use influence model, you've got to know people to effectively influence them, especially to learn, because our default way to try to motivate people is how we're motivated. And that doesn't work for everybody. In fact, that's not going to work for most everybody. Learning about our people is going to help us to motivate them in a way that will cause them to take ownership and be motivated. And that's the job of a leader, is to have that understanding about their people. It's all part of this culture or ecosystem that we talk about, and we've talked about numerous times, is recognizing, understanding the people, and work with them as part of the team, as a and how what they do and how they behave influences the rest of it. And if we try to just make everybody behave and do one way, it's a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's get into the next one. So, right, we're getting into options for personal development. So, first one is going to be formal education, right? That's a no-brainer. But that doesn't mean that you can't go back to school when you're older. I think when we say formal education, everybody thinks about, in your 20s, you're going to college, maybe in your mid 20s, late 20s, you're getting a master's degree or something like that. But retooling and reskilling, you can get a certification. You don't need a full degree. You can go get a specific certification from an online or from a college or a school. Harvard right now is stamping out certifications left and right, and it's really easy to put go get it. Now you got a Harvard designation on your resume. But formal education, right? That's more of, I speak to you, you listen, you try to retain as much information as you can, and you do some homework to try to memorize that information. What are your thoughts on?
And pass a test.
Pass a test.
Formal education in the strictest sense, I would suggest to any leader, should be your last resort approach. It's the value of formal education is efficient in terms of processing people through. Okay, the effectiveness, though, is in question, and the ability to assess it is in question, because when we get into formal education and we talk mass production, the typical form of assessment is a written assessment, and written assessments at worst only assess what you've memorized. At best, it will, if it's well written, begin to assess thinking skills some. But even that, it's limited. But it is a part of what to consider. And I would suggest that formal education, we talk about learning and training at 3 levels: awareness, and then the education or learning part, and then the application. I would suggest that the formal education model is best primarily for awareness purposes, rather than thinking it's going to be there for application.
Yeah, I wouldn't even go different. I'd say it's just education piece, because awareness is lacking. I see lack of awareness. I see it's hit and miss. It depends on the teacher.
Right.
It depends on the professor. It depends on the teacher, whatever the level of education you're getting. Some are really good. Some are really good at showing how you just learned, how it is fitting in. Not necessarily how to do it in a company, but they're showing you the big picture. A lot of times, what's that?
Context.
Yeah, context. That's the piece that I think is missing a lot, because they're teaching to a book, they're teaching to a test. But the good professors, the good teachers, are usually the ones that have done it as a job before, is what I've noticed. The ones that have been in the field versus just educators, they are more likely to create that context, that create the right awareness, that creates the desire to learn, retain, and be able to apply in the future. But context absolutely matters.
And I just want to shout out to Ricky and Wally. We appreciate the comments and support, and glad that it is resonating with you guys. And yes, one aspect is, as we begin to come together, the concept of great minds think alike becomes more the norm, and less of directing and more about motivation and intrinsic movement and experience. So thanks, guys. Appreciate that.
So the next one is going to be online training, right? Whether this is company provided or you seek it out, or you went, excuse me, to YouTube and you decided to, empower yourself to gain the knowledge. Guys, that's why I reframed that question in the beginning. You have YouTube, you have Khan Academy, you have Udemy, you have endless lists of courses you can take online at the convenience of your own time, at the topic of your choosing, at a very small or no cost at all. So when people tell me, why am I not getting developed? I go, because you're not wanting the development, because you're not seeking the development. You want somebody to come in and a silver platter serve you up what you want, what you need, exactly how you need it. And that's the wrong approach. When you have online training, you need to look around. But also as an employer, you need to consider, should I be providing online training to my employees? Think about this. If I take a time, an hour to 2 hours to do in-person, in-house development, which we'll talk about in a second, that is costly. It's more costly than we think because you're taking people away from revenue generating activities. That's the bottom line. I mean, I don't want to be cold and hard, but that matters to a business probably the most when it comes down to financials. You have to spend as much time in revenue generating activities as possible. But now you created a piss poor, development for our in-house. It's not custom tailored. It's only relevant to 25% of the people. You made the other 75% come because that's the system. And now it's wasted. You wasted so much time. Instead, either outsource, hey, right here, we can help you, or find an existing one, whatever it may be, and tailor that development. That's how easy it is. Online development is the easiest to tailor because you don't need space. But here's the trick. If you pay for it, and you're able to properly motivate your team member and connect it to their future desires, visions, all that kind of stuff, they're going to be more than willing to do it on their own time because it's their personal development. They're going to look at it that way versus a company mandate that requires me to do HR training and you have to do it on my own time. And no, that's awful. That's not how they're going to feel. They're going to be excited, but that why and connecting it to them is really important for it.
Well, and what I explain to teachers when I train them, you want to change your audience from a group of students to a group of learners. And it sounds like a play on words, but it's not. The difference is the motivation. If you can help develop the motivation for someone to own their personal development themselves and then facilitate ways for them to do it, you have done a great deal towards true development of your people. Online training is one of those ways because it gives the flexibility to both from a time standpoint as well as the what is being offered standpoint. And it's a great instrument. Now, the downside is when you're doing online training, you typically don't have the option to interact with someone for questions and the like. But from a flexibility and variety of offering, online is a great tool.
You just brought up a good point. Before we jump to the next one, you can click it. But discussing online training, just because it's not feasible or seems not feasible, it doesn't mean it's not feasible. Use forums, create forums for your people, right? Set up a private forum, or the company that you're using, we could do this for you. Set up a private forum to discuss the learning so they can go and post questions, post their thoughts, post their feelings, post, whatever, suggestions for solutions, all in this forum that's contained internally for your company. So none of this stuff is getting out, no bad PR, nothing like that, but people are still able to discuss because that's, me and Kev talk about this all the time. One of the hardest things about being virtual versus in person is not having that water cooler talk, not having that discussion space. And you can create that virtually through forums.
Real quick comment from Wally that is another insight into the concept of formal education, process of learning and acquiring what I understand. Yeah, that's another way to explain it. Thanks for that.
So the next one is what we already mentioned is in-house training. This is your typical one. And I'm still happy when people provide in-house training. Trust me, there's levels to this, right? We're always talking about the pinnacle, the best way to do it. But at the same time, somebody's not doing development at all, right? There's many, many companies out there, whether it be big or small, that just don't spend enough time on development. And the reason for it are sad sometimes. Some of the reasons I've heard, and one of the main reasons I've heard why people don't do development is because the change that it takes to make this process happen is 1 to 2 years. And they're going, well, they're not going to stick around long enough to, actually see this happen. And that's the wrong way of thinking about it. The development tool becomes the retention tool for your people. When they're seeing you're investing in them, maybe right now they're only staying 1 to 2 years, but once you start really developing and custom tailoring that development to them, that tenure is going to extend. So that way that, you actually get the reward of that development. I'm sure you understand this well with your training stuff, because a lot of stuff you train takes time to see, revenue changes with.
Yeah, and this fear of, well, if I train them and lose them, well, what happens if you don't train them and don't lose them?
What if you don't train them and they stay, right? Like,
yeah. And please understand, in-house training can be expensive, but sometimes it's what's needed. And by the way, plug here, something we can do. We can come in and based on assessing your group, we can then tailor in-house training to a group or multiple groups depending on the need. So it can be expensive, but it can also get you major return on your investment by having in-house training for your folks. And it will, in some cases, for some people, it's going to remove some of the stress of development, because there's something they can't get beyond on their own. So they need somebody to come in and train them on it and help them get that understanding.
In training and development, it matters relativity, right? How relative is this to what I do on a daily basis? In-house training allows you to customize everything to your company needs, to the stories that your company has experienced, to the problems that it faces directly versus some generalizations. And when you do that, your training is going to be so much more effective. So that's the beauty of in-house training. Usually you can get the most customized company-specific development.
And by the way, one of the things we do that differentiates us from a lot is we don't come in and tell you we've got the 7 steps and just let us teach 7 steps. We come in and find out what is needed and tailor it based on the needs of your group as well as the culture of your group. It may be, as part of our team approach, it may be that depending on the culture of your group, for example, Anton might be the lead instructor and the rest of the team is just there to help because Anton fits the culture you're there. Or it might be me or one of the ladies, whatever. So just consider that as you consider what we are talking about. Comment that Wally made is that yes, one of the nice things now is that for online is the LinkedIn courses. I know I have taken a couple of those, and they're a great tool. So no doubt.
And the last one that we have here is peer-to-peer. One of my favorite, but this one takes a lot of leadership in order to make this happen. The peer-to-peer development doesn't just happen on its own. It may organically happen because you have some natural developers, but if you want to have a peer-to-peer culture, that requires a lot from you. And that goes from motivation to rewards to, actually painting a picture for that peer that's developing other peers and to why they're doing that, how they're impacting them, right? If they're intrinsically motivated person, show them how you're changing those people's lives. Constantly remind them of that so they're doing more of them. Maybe they want to move up in the career. Show them how doing this will help them as a manager and stuff like that. Show them how it's a stepping stone. But the point is, you can create an environment, a learning culture where peers mentor peers. What does that do for you as a leader? It opens up time for you to focus on higher level things and mentor those future leaders that are going to replace you. And when you leave, there should be somebody ready to go that's going to step into your shoes, make it better because they know everything you knew, and now they're adding their own sauce to it, and they already have this group of developers that are ready to take their role. And then this cycle continues. Yeah,
this is, as a leader, to me, this is one of the best ways because not only is it effective in personal development for the person getting the instruction, the training, whatever, it is personal development for the person giving it. And it's a way for a leader to give opportunity for your individual team members to get a sense of respect, get a sense of care, get a sense of value as part of your team.
Mhm.
But now, as Anton said, this is a tough one. And if you're wanting to do this as a train the trainer, teacher trainer, been doing this a long time, if you really want to be effective at doing this, you need to learn how to effectively lead peer-to-peer instruction, because if this is done well, it is amazing, but it can also destroy the culture you've built if you're not careful and don't know how to do it well. So really encourage you to consider it, but make sure as a leader you're ready to effectively lead peer-to-peer.
Love it. That's about all we got for the time today, guys. Started a little late. I apologize for that. But biggest thing is go to prospectiveforce.com. One of the things that we're trying to focus on right now, stress is destroying workplaces. It's just not seen. Go with your team, with yourself. Go to prospectiveforce.com. Take a quick 12-question quiz. That 12-question quiz will tell you how you're doing with stress. If you're doing poorly, you get a link that just takes you right to a 60-question assessment for free, absolutely for free, because we're trying to help spread this mission, this movement of human SOS. And from there, you'll get 12 of our principles, as Kevin talked about. We don't have these one-size-fits-all things or a secret formula. We have principles that we focus on, and they're very broad. And it will tell you which one of those principles your stress is not being managed, well in, or it's the worst area of them all. And you start focusing on that, and you start improving slowly at a time. But just go connect symptoms to stress problems, and it'll open up your eyes. Prospectiveforce.com. Go do it.
Anton, we real quick, we've still got a couple of minutes, and Wally's got a question, and we don't want to walk away without addressing it. Says, is in-house training can be beneficial, or the same context repeat again and again? We may not get major return. Please enlighten. As I understand the question, taking it almost sounds like the effectiveness of cookie cutter. And one of the things that that we are against or don't agree with, and we don't use it, is a cookie cutter method to bringing training and or cultural alignment, those things. And so the idea of bringing it in and repeating it over and over again is probably not going to be beneficial, but rather each training component needs to be tailored and customized. Now, one caveat to that is if you conduct an in-house training, probably a good idea to have it recorded so that it can be referenced later, but it is not designed to replace effective in-house training. Your thoughts, Anton?
Yep. No, I agree with you fully. It's the problem with in-house training that I see a lot is it's not designed from the start with customization in mind.
Right.
If you started that way, if you started building in-house training, that it should remain relevant and important and be able to, matter to people the most, because they're not taking the whole thing. That's the problem with a lot of in-house training is without customization, you're making people spend time in areas they don't want to or don't need to. And then they start looking at it as a waste of time. I see this all the time. You start a training and you go, here we go again. I did this last year. Why am I doing this again? So finally I started putting in a test that said, here's a quiz, prove to us real quick that you know this so you can move on to the other thing. Great. So that means I don't have to spend 2 hours in watching these videos. I can take a 5-minute quiz, get out of that, and move to the things that are really relevant to me. But the point there is whenever you're building this training out, start with what are all the different customizations need to exist, create them, and realize that not everybody needs to take them all. And then your in-house training can actually be effective.
Very good. So again, thanks for the great comments and discussion. And we'll be back next Tuesday and have more insights about human SOS in general. Stress will always be included, and then learning how to have a great organizational ecosystem. So thanks, everybody. Join us again next Tuesday, 11 o'clock. same time, same location. Thanks. Have a great and blessed week. Take care.
Bye, guys.